Hi, my name is Claire. My brother sent me a text the week of his wedding. Don't bother coming. But here's the part nobody talks about. While they cut me out of the guest list, they still made me pay for the flowers, still demanded $3,000 for their family gift. They didn't just erase me from the photos, they rewrote me as an assistant to my own work. I thought I could swallow it, keep the peace. But what they didn't know was that every receipt had my name on it. And the moment I stopped holding their world together, it collapsed. Do you want to know how a family can erase someone so carefully, and how one woman erased herself right back? I woke up before sunrise, that pale gray hour when the city outside my window was still wrapped in mist. My apartment smelled faintly of last night's coffee, and my phone lay face down on the nightstand. When I picked it up, a single notification glowed through the dimness. It was from Tobin. Just 6 words on the screen. Don't bother coming to the wedding. Underneath, another line. It's not about you. I stared at it, still half under the blanket. The words didn't settle in right away. For a moment, I thought it was some kind of autocorrect error or a joke, the kind of sarcastic thing my brother used to send in college. But then I saw the time. 3:14 a.m. And the cold tone. No emojis, no explanation, no heart. I sat up, the blanket pooling around my waist. My heart felt strangely quiet, like it hadn't decided yet how to beat. The screen light made everything else in the room look bluish. I reread the message, slowly, mouthing the words, "Don't bother coming." It was the kind of sentence that would have been unthinkable 10 years ago. Tobin had been my closest ally back then, the one who'd sneak me extra dessert when Mom said no. I opened our text history. The last conversation between us was me sending him a link to a florist in Portland I'd put a deposit on for his wedding. "Don't worry about it," I'd written. "I've got it covered." That was 6 months ago. He'd sent back a thumbs up, nothing else. I set the phone down on the nightstand and pressed my palms into my eyes. My body felt like it had just absorbed a low-voltage shock. The apartment was silent except for the sound of traffic starting to build on Burnside Street. I told myself it had to be a misunderstanding. People get stressed planning weddings. Maybe Isolde had said something, and he'd lashed out. Maybe he'd apologize in an hour. I picked the phone back up but didn't call. My thumb hovered over his name and then drifted to our old photos instead. Birthday parties, camping trips, even a picture of me at his college graduation, holding a bouquet bigger than my torso. The screen blurred. I blinked and realized it wasn't the screen. By 9 a.m., I still hadn't replied. Instead, I'd made a pot of coffee and sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through emails I wasn't reading. I kept hearing the same sentence in my head, like an echo in a concrete stairwell. "It's not about you." That afternoon, my phone rang. Mom. I let it go to voicemail, but she called again. On the third ring, I answered. "Hi, honey," she said, her voice sugary but clipped. "I'm glad you picked up. Listen, we're all pitching in for Tobin and Isolde's wedding gift, a down payment on their new house. We thought $3,000 each was fair." I nearly dropped the phone. "Mom, I'm not even invited." A pause, then a sigh I knew too well, the kind that said I was being difficult again. "Let's not make this about that. This is about family. Be the bigger person." I pressed the bridge of my nose. "I already paid the florist's deposit months ago." "That was different," she said quickly. "This is their future. We want to give them a proper start." The call ended without a resolution. I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no either. She hung up sounding satisfied, as though silence counted as agreement. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the mug in my hands. The smell of coffee had turned bitter. My fingers went numb. They weren't just excluding me, they were billing me for the privilege. I opened my budgeting spreadsheet on my laptop. Rent, utilities, taxes, a dental bill I'd been putting off. I thought about the freelance projects stacked up in my inbox. Even if I drained my savings, $3,000 wasn't nothing. Yet guilt crept in like a draft under the door. Be the bigger person. I'd been that my whole life. I was the reliable one, the sister who always understood. The one who sent money quietly when Dad's truck broke down, who skipped vacations to cover Mom's hospital copay. I pushed the laptop away and got up. Out the window, the neighborhood was alive with small, ordinary happiness. Kids wobbling on bikes, a couple planting herbs in raised beds. Everything looked so easy. I told myself out loud, "You'll send the money. You always do." My voice sounded strange, flat, but as I rinsed my mug in the sink, a different thought surfaced. Quiet, but solid, like a stone under water. For the first time, I didn't agree with myself. I walked into my living room, the afternoon light slanting across the hardwood floor. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Mom. "Please send the money by Friday so we can include you on the card." I didn't reply. I sat on the couch, staring at the dust motes turning in the sunlight. I thought of the florist contracts, the deposits, the receipts sitting in my email. This time, I didn't open my banking app. I opened the contracts instead. I left my laptop open on the table, the florist contracts still glowing on the screen. Outside, the afternoon light had thinned to a hazy gold. Traffic below hummed like a faraway beehive. I got up to refill my coffee, telling myself I'd review the numbers one more time before making a decision. That was when a new email slid into my inbox with the subject line, "Final guest list, approved for print." I didn't plan to open it. I had no reason to. Technically, I wasn't going. But my hand moved on its own. The PDF loaded, columns of names in elegant serif font, neatly divided into tables. My eyes drifted down the page, scanning out of habit until they stopped. I wasn't there, not under family, not under close friends, not anywhere. Even the vendor contacts were listed, but not me. The realization felt like someone had reached into my chest and turned a knob until everything went quiet. For a long moment, I just stared at the screen, hoping I'd missed it, scrolling back up and down, back up and down. The names were a roll call of my own past. Cousins I'd sent Christmas checks to, neighbors whose kids I'd babysat, even my ex's sister, whom I hadn't seen in 5 years. All invited, all included. Except me. A sound came from my throat, half a laugh, half a cough. I pushed my chair back and stood up, but the apartment felt too small now. I paced once, twice, then sat back down. That bitterness, the one I'd buried for years, rose like something sour. My mind leapt to a night 3 years ago. Tobin's investment account had been flagged. He'd called me at 11 p.m., panicked, whispering so Isolde wouldn't hear. Without thinking, I'd wired him $5,000 to cover the penalties. "I'll pay you back," he'd said. "You're saving my life." No one else ever knew. No one ever thanked me. The next month, when he'd taken Isolde to Maui for her birthday, he posted pictures of cocktails by the pool. No mention of the sister who'd bailed him out. Now here I was, looking at a list of names that told a story where I didn't exist. I grabbed my phone. I hit call on Tobin's name. It rang 4 times, then went to voicemail. His recorded voice was cheerful, generic. "Hey, it's Tobin, leave a message." I hung up without speaking. Then I typed a text. "Hey, I saw the list. Was that on purpose?" I watched the screen. No dots. No reply. My thumb hesitated, then slid to Mom's contact. She answered on the second ring. "Don't make this about you, Claire," she said before I could even speak. "It feels like I was cut out," I whispered, my voice thin. "You weren't cut out. It's just, things are complicated." That phrase. Things are complicated. She'd used it every time I'd asked why Tobin got new sneakers while mine came from clearance racks, why my birthdays were afterthoughts. It was code for, "You're the problem." I closed my eyes. "Mom, I already paid the florist deposit." "That was your choice," she said, her tone sharpening. "We're all trying to give Tobin and Isolde a beautiful day. Don't ruin this." "I'm not ruining anything," I said quietly. But she'd already gone, the line dead. I set the phone down and pressed my palms into the table. The screen of my laptop had dimmed, but the guest list still glowed faintly, like a ghost. I clicked print. The machine in the corner hummed and spat out page after page until the stack was thick enough to slap. I spread the papers across my kitchen table. My apartment suddenly looked like an evidence room. I took a red pen from the drawer and started circling names. That couple? I'd introduced them at a wine tasting. That venue? My contact had gotten Tobin a discount. That wine brand? My deal through a client. I kept circling until my hands shook. Every name was a reminder of something I'd done, a door I'd opened, a call I'd made, a bill I'd covered. And still, no seat, no name tag, no place at the table. The air felt heavy. I pushed my chair back and stood up. My reflection in the kitchen window looked like a stranger, jaw tight, eyes dark. Without thinking, I ripped the top page in half. The sound was sharp in the quiet. Then another page, and another. Paper shredded under my hands until the stack was confetti on the floor. I started cleaning automatically, gathering the torn pieces into a bag. I didn't put on music. I didn't call anyone. The only sound was the sweep of my hand across the table. Somewhere in that silence, my mind was working, sharpening, not in anger, but in clarity. A picture was forming, not yet complete but undeniable. I walked to the window and looked down at the street. People moved through their own lives, a man carrying groceries, a kid chasing a dog. No one knew that upstairs, a woman was rewriting her place in her own family. I poured myself a glass of water, sat back down, and stared at the empty table. For the first time, the guilt wasn't heavier than the insult. Funny, I was the only one not invited. Yet somehow, the only one who made any of it happen. The air still clung to my skin after the drive. I hadn't planned on going. I told myself that morning that I wouldn't show up, that I had too much pride left to stand in their house like a stranger. But somewhere between brushing my teeth and tying my hair back, the momentum of habit took over. And now here I was, outside Mom's house, holding a casserole dish like an apology no one asked for. I stepped through the front door quietly, but not quietly enough to be invisible. "Claire?" Someone called from the kitchen, not even turning to look. "Can you set the table?" "Of course." No hello, no eye contact, just another task on the list, just another pair of hands expected to make things happen without taking up space. I walked into the dining room, put down the casserole on the counter, and started pulling plates from the cupboard. The table had already been wiped down. Polished, silverware laid out in neat rows like a hotel brunch. I noticed they'd added a place card at the head for Tobin, gold script, thick stock. I didn't see mine. I didn't ask. I set the plates, one by one, around the table while conversation drifted in from the living room. Isolde laughing at something Dad said, Tobin talking about the honeymoon cruise. No one came in to help. No one even asked how I was doing. Not after that text. Not after the list. The worst part? I wasn't surprised. I poured orange juice into a glass and carried it to Isolde, who reached for it like she'd forgotten I had a name. "Thanks," she said, eyes still on her phone. "Oh, can you check if the scones are warm?" I nodded. I didn't even blink. Later, I tried to contribute to a story, something about a family camping trip years ago, the one where Tobin had fallen into the river. I barely got 2 sentences out before Mom cut me off. "Oh, honey, that was ages ago. Let's let Tobin talk about his proposal. It's such a great story." Right, let Tobin talk. I leaned back and folded my hands in my lap. From this angle, I could see the fireplace mantel. Every photo was recent, weddings, holidays, birthdays, but none had me in them, not a single one. Even the group shots somehow excluded me, like I was out of frame on purpose. I got up and walked into the kitchen, refilling drinks, checking oven timers, wiping crumbs. That was my role today, apparently. Not guest, not family, just a pair of capable hands. And then Tobin pulled out a poster board and unrolled it onto the dining room table. "This is the mock-up for the wedding welcome wall," he said, grinning. "Let me know what you think." I walked back in, wiping my hands on a dish towel. Everyone gathered around the table, admiring the design. Photos of Tobin and Isolde, childhood memories, some group family shots, decorative quotes about love and unity. I leaned forward, my heart stilled. I wasn't in a single photo, not even the group ones. When I finally spoke, my voice was too soft. "Hey, where's the photo from the lake house? The one I took?" Tobin looked up like I'd just spoken out of turn in a courtroom. "Well, it's just the A-team. You weren't available that day." That wasn't true. I had been there. I was the one who'd taken the picture. I'd arranged the kids, wiped the fog off the lens, even told Mom to fix her necklace. I remembered exactly where I stood, off to the side, deliberately out of frame. I didn't argue. I didn't call him out. I just stood there, absorbing it all, letting it coat me like smoke. You stop noticing after a while. I excused myself and walked to the bathroom. I closed the door and locked it behind me, not because I was afraid someone would come in, but because I needed a moment that belonged to me. The mirror was unforgiving. I gripped the sides of the sink and forced myself to look into my own eyes. My reflection stared back, tired and too quiet. "You are not a servant," I said softly. "You are not invisible." Outside the door, laughter erupted again. Someone had told a joke. A glass dropped. It shattered. I heard the sharp intake of breath, the movement of feet. I didn't move. For once, I let someone else handle it. For once, I didn't rush out to sweep up the mess. I stayed in the bathroom, breathing in through my nose and out through my mouth, my hands planted firmly on the counter. The silence inside me was no longer numb. It was steady. Eventually, I stepped out, walked back through the house, and past the living room. No one looked up. No one asked where I'd been. I grabbed my keys from the bowl by the door and walked out. By the time I pulled out of the driveway, my hands were steady on the wheel. The car ride was quiet. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't check my phone. I didn't cry. Back home, I walked into my apartment, set my purse on the chair, and sat on the edge of my bed. I replayed everything, from the moment I walked in to the moment I walked out. Every ignored hello, every task I did without thanks, every photo I wasn't in. They weren't forgetting me. They were replacing me. This wasn't some casual oversight. This was a rebranding of family, and I was the outdated logo. I looked around my apartment, my space, my life. No one else's name on the lease, no one else's dishes in the sink. Just me, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel ashamed. I was tired of auditioning for a seat that was never mine. They could keep the show. I built the stage. I wasn't missing, I was deliberately removed. And they forgot who taught them how to hold the camera. The next morning, sunlight cut through my blinds in thin, sharp stripes, striping the wall like bars. I sat at the edge of the bed, yesterday's sweater still clinging to me, my laptop still open from the night before, but untouched, glowing faintly on the nightstand. The apartment was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that isn't peace but aftermath. My phone buzzed across the sheets. A new message. A college friend. "Your brother's wedding thank you video is stunning." My thumb hesitated. I hadn't spoken to Tobin since the brunch at Mom's house. Not a text, not even an afterthought. Stunning hung there in front of me like bait. I should have ignored it, but I opened the link anyway. The video began with soft piano music, the kind you'd hear in an ad for family vacations or some curated memory reel. Faces appeared in gentle dissolves. Tobin, Isolde, Mom and Dad, cousins whose names I could barely recall. Everyone framed in warm light, the footage polished and intimate, every shot carefully chosen. Captions scrolled beneath the images. "Special thanks to," followed by names and portraits. My name never appeared. My face never appeared. I watched it again, slower, letting each frame land like a door closing in my face. There were flower arrangements, mine. The ones I spent weekends negotiating, sourcing cheaper alternatives that didn't look cheap. The lighting scheme, that was mine too. I'd drawn it out with the planner on a napkin, sketching until midnight. The venue? I was the one who had wrangled the contract down to something affordable. Even the signature cocktail, amber gold in its glass, was my recipe, borrowed from a summer party years ago. But in this video, none of that existed. According to Tobin, according to Isolde, according to the story my family wanted to tell, I had never existed. The piano trailed off. The final frame listed every contributor, every extra hand, every assistant. The florist's assistant had her name listed. The guy who delivered chairs had his. Even the Uber driver who'd shuttled the groomsmen made the roll. But not me. By the time it ended, my coffee was stone cold on the nightstand. I muted the video and stared at the frozen faces on the last frame, the neat white text scrolling beneath them. My temples pulsed. Not anger, not yet. More like vertigo, cold vertigo, watching years of labor dissolve into someone else's highlight reel. I opened my email, fingers trembling. Spam. Receipts. No apology from Mom. No word from Tobin. My inbox looked like a graveyard where only the irrelevant survived. The clock on the wall ticked louder than usual, every second like a countdown. 3 days later, the card arrived. Heavy stock, embossed lettering, the kind of weight that announces importance. The return address, Tobin's. I tore it open without thinking. Inside was a glossy photo of the happy couple, beaming under an arch of flowers I had paid the deposit on. Beneath their image, in cursive script, "Thank you to all who stood by us and never made things harder." The card dug into my skin as I held it. It wasn't gratitude, it was rebuke. A guilt trap dressed in satin, printed in ink thick enough to wound. A message meant to frame me, not thank me. I set it down on the table and stared at it. My kitchen clock ticked. Outside, a delivery truck rumbled by. Inside, my breathing went shallow. I picked up the phone and dialed Mom. She answered on the third ring. "It wasn't personal," she said before I could speak. "Isolde made the list. I didn't want drama." My throat tightened. "What about the flowers? The money? My time?" She sighed like I was a child asking too many questions. "We thought you were just being supportive. That's what family does." I swallowed. "But I'm not family enough to be seen?" Silence. Then, cold as a blade, "Let's not argue about tone, Claire. Tone. Always tone." As though the problem was never their actions, only my voice. I closed my eyes, words trembling in my chest. "Mom, do you even hear yourself?" "We're all under stress. Don't make this about you," she replied, flat. And then she was gone. The line clicked dead. I stayed there, holding the phone to my ear, listening to nothing. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't plead. "This was my last call," I said aloud into the silence, and then pressed end. The screen went black. I deleted the thank you video from my messages, but the card remained on the table, its cursive script shining like a dare I hadn't yet answered. I stood, walked to the window. Outside, the world spun on. Mail carriers dragging carts, dog walkers tugging leashes, kids shouting as they zipped past on scooters, all of them moving forward, oblivious to the implosion in my kitchen. I turned back to my desk, opened my laptop, and began logging into the vendor portals. The florist contract, the lighting invoice, the venue schedule, email threads where my name was buried at the bottom, suffocated under planners' cheerful thanks and assistants appreciate it. They wanted me silent. They wanted me smiling. They wanted me invisible. Fine, I'll give them one of those. The morning after I deleted the thank you video, my apartment felt like an empty theater after a performance. Quiet, but with the ghosts of applause still hanging in the air. I sat at my kitchen table with a mug of tea, staring at my laptop. The glow from the screen cast pale light across the wood. I logged back into the vendor portals. For weeks, these dashboards had been my invisible workspace, the backstage where the real wedding happened. As the pages loaded, I noticed something off. My name, Claire Collins, once listed at the top of every contract, was gone. In its place, Isolde Jennings. I blinked, leaned in, clicked refresh. No, it wasn't a glitch. They had actually changed it. My stomach dropped. Not from shock, but from the coldness of the move. They hadn't just cut me out socially. They'd rewritten the credits. I opened another portal. Same thing. My name erased. Isolde's inserted. Only one detail remained unchanged. My business's tax ID number sitting quietly at the bottom of each page. Legally, Collins Events still owned every agreement. I grabbed my phone and dialed the florist. "Morning, Westbrook Florals," a bright voice answered. "Hi, this is Claire Collins. I'm calling about the Jennings wedding account." "Oh," the receptionist said, pausing. "We're now dealing directly with Mrs. Jennings. Sorry, who is this again?" "I'm the planner of record," I said slowly. "Right. I just see Isolde Jennings here. She's been handling everything." I forced my voice steady. "Thank you." I hung up. I checked my email. My access to several vendor dashboards had been disabled overnight. Passwords rejected, permissions revoked. I scrolled further, heart hammering, until I found the original contracts I'd signed months ago. And there it was, the clause, clear as day. If not paid in full by the client of record, the booking is void. I sat back in my chair. They'd changed my name on the screen, but not in the legal paperwork. On paper, I was still the client. For the first time in days, my pulse slowed. I picked up the phone again and dialed Mom. This time I wasn't calling to plead. She answered on the second ring. Claire, can we not? Why was I removed from the vendor records? A pause, then her voice, practiced and cool. Isolde didn't want confusion. And you've been very emotional lately. You mean vocal, I said. We just wanted peace, she said quickly. You're making things harder. I felt my jaw tighten. No, I was trying to be seen. You just wanted me quiet. Claire, she snapped, you always twist everything. That's why you're not in the video. There it was, the final invalidation, spoken like a verdict. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't beg. I just said, got it, and hung up. The line went dead, but my apartment seemed to hum. The fridge whirred softly. Outside, someone started a car. I stared at my reflection in the darkened laptop screen and felt something click into place. I closed my eyes and saw every family moment where I'd been the fixer. Tobin's frozen credit card, Mom's surprise anniversary party, Dad's hospital bills, the countless nights I stayed late at events so they could leave early, always the invisible glue, always thanked with silence. Not anymore. I stood up, went to my desk, and pulled out a folder where I kept paper copies of every contract. The pages were thick with highlighted clauses, deadlines, cancellation terms, refund policies. I began circling dates in red pen, marking the ones that mattered. 7 days before the wedding. I texted Darcy, an old friend from law school, who'd once helped me draft these agreements when my business was still a side hustle. Need your eyes on some contracts, I wrote. She called within the hour. Claire, I read them. You're still the client of record. They can't change that. If you don't pay, you can cancel. Full stop. I exhaled slowly. And no penalties? None. The deposits go back to your business account, legally airtight. A small smile spread across my face. Not joy, not revenge, clarity. Then I'll handle it, I said. Be careful, Darcy warned. They'll come for you when they realize. I know, I said, and hung up. As evening fell, my apartment darkened. I didn't bother turning on the lights. The glow from my laptop was enough. I drafted a series of emails, each one polite, professional, free of any trace of anger. Dear Harrison, as the client on record for the Jennings wedding scheduled, date, please consider this notice of cancellation effective immediately. Refund the deposit to Collins Events LLC as stipulated. I wrote 4 of them, one for the venue, one for the florist, one for the lighting, one for the linens. I checked them twice, cross-referenced invoice numbers, attached the original contracts. Then I scheduled them to send 9:00 a.m. sharp, 7 days before the wedding. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. My apartment was silent except for the faint hum of my fridge and the soft click of my cat's paws against the floor. They had taken me off the stage, but I still owned the lights, the music, and the venue. The sky was still dark when I rolled over in bed and checked my phone. I hadn't been able to sleep, not really. My mind had stayed alert, like it was waiting for the next hit, the next insult masquerading as a simple decision or wedding logistics. There it was, a message from a friend I hadn't spoken to in months. It just said, "Did you see Westbrook Floral's Instagram post? Looks amazing. Totally Isolde's style." I clicked the link without thinking. The photo loaded fast, high-res, perfectly filtered, warm white tones, with soft pink peonies cascading down custom archways I had personally sketched, budgeted, and secured 6 months ago. But it wasn't the flowers that hit me. It was the caption. Beautiful selections by our lovely bride, Isolde Jennings. Thank you for your creative vision. For a full 10 seconds, I couldn't breathe. My chest didn't rise, didn't fall. Just this strange pressure, like all the air had been vacuumed out of the room. I stared at the screen. Those flowers had come from a vendor I'd courted for 2 years. I'd hand-picked the color palette to work with the venue's light at sunset. I'd negotiated the exact quantity, the delivery schedule, the placement, everything. And now she was getting credit for it. Scrolling through the comments made it worse. Isolde really has an eye for elegance. Such a classy bride. Obsessed with her design sense. More reposts. Wedding bloggers tagging Isolde, praising her vision. It was like watching someone walk across a stage, accept your Lifetime Achievement Award, and then thank everyone but you. I clicked out of the app and stared at the wall for a while. I didn't cry. That part of me had gone quiet days ago. What I felt now was sharper, cleaner. I was being erased, not just removed from the picture, but replaced in the story. By noon, I had settled back into work. Sort of. I was typing half-heartedly on a client proposal when another notification popped up in my inbox. Subject: Final Wedding Program Review. I opened the PDF, a fancy digital booklet, gold foil borders, soft script fonts, pastel color themes. Inside, they'd listed every contributor: caterers, stylists, family, friends, and then, toward the bottom, logistics assistant, Claire Jennings. Claire Jennings, not Claire Collins. And logistics assistant? I stared at that line like it was in another language, not planner, not event designer, not even family. Assistant, the girl who picks up sandwiches, the girl who carries boxes, the background help. I flipped through the rest. Everyone else had their full names, proper titles, and glowing descriptors. Even someone who delivered ice had vendor partner, Joseph R. But me? I wasn't even my full name. I whispered aloud. They're not just excluding me. They're rewriting me. I didn't know which made me angrier, the deliberate omission or the casual audacity of calling me someone else entirely. I set the laptop down, walked to the kitchen, and poured myself water. My hands were shaking slightly. I needed to say something. Not tomorrow. Now. I sat back down and opened a new text message. To Isolde. The flower credit. Was that your doing? No reply. I waited 20 minutes. Then I texted Tobin. Your program calls me an assistant. Should I send you the invoices again? He replied within 3 minutes. It's not personal. Isolde handled that part. That part. I typed slowly. So did I, with my time and my money. No reply. Of course not. I stared at our text thread. I thought about the times I had stayed up until 2 a.m. on Zoom with the vendors, negotiating back and forth about candle heights and chair widths. The weekend I spent editing their seating chart so it would flow seamlessly with the venue layout, the deposit I'd made from my own business account. They weren't just ungrateful, they were intentional. That night, after dinner, I sat at my desk and reopened my email scheduler. The drafts I'd written 2 days ago were still there. Cancellation notices for each vendor, each one waiting to be sent. I clicked into each one, reread it word for word. They were polite, firm, emotionless, exactly how professionals speak when they know they hold the cards. Then I added one more line to each. As the contract remains unpaid, I will not proceed further. Kindly refund the deposit to my business account. I double-checked the attachments. Contracts, payment logs, signed agreements. Nothing vague, nothing debatable. And then I scheduled all 4 emails to send the next morning at 9:00 a.m., exactly 7 days before the wedding. The timing wasn't coincidental. It was the final window before full payment was due. Vendors would release the dates, cancel deliveries, return the funds. I leaned back and looked at the dark screen, watching my reflection stare back at me. Let them call me petty. Let them call me emotional. I was done with playing the dutiful extra. They wanted me to disappear. I'll vanish, but take the whole stage curtain with me. At exactly 9:00 a.m., the soft click of my mouse sent out 4 perfectly timed emails. One to the florist, one to the caterer, one to the venue, one to the AV team, all with subject lines that looked like standard business correspondence. Update on services. I sipped my coffee, calm. The city outside my apartment window was waking up. Garbage trucks rumbled down the street, a neighbor's dog barked at a jogger, and the early spring sun made the pavement shimmer like wet stone. It was an ordinary morning, except I'd just dismantled a wedding. There wasn't a dramatic sound or a cinematic crack of thunder, just my finger pressing send 4 times. But behind screens and office phones, things began to split. By 10:15 a.m., the florist's auto-reply landed. We acknowledge your cancellation. Refund will be processed within 48 hours. By 10:46, the caterer sent a confused email. We're sorry to hear this, but as per your contract, we will comply. At 11:23 a.m., the first call came through. Wedding coordinator, number saved in my phone as Jessica Events. I let it go to voicemail. At 11:37 a.m., Tobin's name flashed across my screen. I picked up. His voice was a mix of panic and fury. Claire, what the hell did you do? I leaned back in my chair, crossed my legs, and let the quiet stretch. I stopped letting you use me. You've ruined everything, he shouted. No, I said softly. I've simply stopped paying for your everything. I could hear Isolda's voice in the background, frantic. Tell her she can't do this. Tobin came back, lower but more venomous. This is petty. You're punishing us for not inviting you. I took a slow sip of my coffee. No, Tobin. I'm reclaiming what's mine. That's different. Silence. Then a click. He'd hung up. I sat there a moment, breathing. It wasn't joy. It wasn't revenge, exactly. It was clarity. By noon, the venue manager called. Hi, Claire. We're confused about the change. We received your cancellation notice. Should we coordinate with Miss Jennings now? I replied professionally. As the contract holder, I've canceled all services. Refunds will be processed to my account as per clause 7.2. A pause. Then the woman's voice dropped. I understand. We'll proceed accordingly. I closed the call and stared at the ceiling. For months, I'd been pulled into their drama, always cleaning up, smoothing edges, being the good sister. And now, the sound of their panic on the other end of the phone felt like a strange exhale I'd been holding back for years. At 2:05 p.m., my phone rang again. This time it was a number I didn't recognize. A small voice came through. Aunt Claire? I sat up straighter. Hi, sweetheart. Is everything okay? It was my niece, Tobin's daughter. She sounded hesitant, like she'd been rehearsing a script. Grandma said you always ruin things. That's why you're not invited. I closed my eyes. The words stung, but not because of her. Because of Marla. Because of the poison she'd passed down. I took a breath. Sweetheart, don't ever believe that. Sometimes people say things when they're upset. It doesn't make them true. She was quiet for a moment. But everyone's mad. I know, I whispered. But sometimes being mad at someone doesn't mean they're wrong. Okay? Okay. And then she hung up. I sat there staring at my phone. My hands trembled slightly. This wasn't just about a wedding. This was about generational erasure, about how my mother had trained us all to perform, to comply, to swallow and smile. And I'd finally stepped off stage. By evening, the inevitable happened. Marla called. Claire, she began, her voice honeyed with guilt. You embarrassed this family today. I looked out the window at the streetlights flickering on. No, Mom, I stopped letting you embarrass me. You've humiliated your brother. Isolda is crying. Do you realize the stress you've caused? I kept my tone even. You trained us to perform, not to connect. And I'm done performing. I'm your mother, she snapped. And I'm your daughter, I said quietly. But that never meant you saw me. There was a long silence. I could hear her breathing, ragged on the other end. We were both realizing it was the end of something, maybe the last real conversation we'd ever have. You're going to regret this, she hissed finally. No, I said. I'm going to recover from this. I hung up. Then, for the first time in years, I blocked her number. I deleted the family group chat, the photos, the endless strings of, could you handle this? And, thanks, Claire, you're a lifesaver. I ordered takeout, Thai food from a small place down the street, and sat by the window. Portland's lights twinkled, cars passed below. A couple argued gently on the sidewalk and then laughed. Life went on. I realized my silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full of everything I'd stopped giving away. They didn't lose a florist. They lost the woman who built the entire room, and they still don't know what they broke. The wind pressed softly against my window pane as the city below flickered into night. I sat curled on the couch, feet tucked beneath me, the steady hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. I'd turned off the lights nearly an hour earlier, not because I craved darkness, but because the glow from the streetlights bleeding through the blinds and the faint blue light of my phone were enough. I didn't need clarity. I already had it. The silence wasn't lonely. It wasn't heavy. It was earned. Exact. At 9:42 p.m., my phone lit up with a notification from Instagram. I almost ignored it. My nerves had been rubbed raw from days of watching my family perform their curated version of the truth online. But the sender's name caught me. Cliff, the lead vendor supervisor. We had spoken dozens of times in the months leading up to the wedding. Table placements, load-in schedules, permits, fire codes. His texts were always short, professional, clipped in tone. No emojis. Never personal. But this message was different. Claire, I hope this isn't overstepping, but I just wanted to say, I know what happened. We all saw it. You were the architect of this entire event. The real one. I don't know what's going on internally, but I didn't want it to go unsaid. We saw you. I saw you. I read it once, then again, and again, slower. There was nothing embellished about his words, no flourish, no dramatic punctuation, just a simple, unvarnished truth. Someone naming what had been made invisible. The tears didn't come right away. What came first was a deep, shaky exhale. A breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding since the engagement announcement. It left me slowly, unspooling months of tension, bitterness, silence. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I simply closed the app, set the phone face down, and walked toward my bedroom closet. On the top shelf, behind an old college sweatshirt I never wore anymore, sat a small gray box. The cardboard was worn at the corners, the ribbon frayed, but it was still intact. I pulled it down carefully and carried it to the bed. Inside were fragments of a life I still carried. Faded photographs, a locket I hadn't worn in years, and one envelope with my name written in my grandmother's elegant cursive. To Claire, when the noise gets too loud to hear yourself. I hadn't opened it at the funeral. I couldn't. Grief had pressed too heavy on me then. Everything had been blurred, unreal. But now, in the stillness I had carved out for myself, I slipped a finger under the seal and unfolded the single sheet of paper. Her voice came through as if she were sitting at the foot of my bed, speaking in the steady rhythm she always carried. You've always been the foundation, the one who holds everything up, even when no one notices. And that's the problem, my girl. Foundations get walked on. People forget they're there, until they crack, until the whole house leans. But don't confuse silence with weakness. Don't confuse invisibility with lack of value. Without you, nothing stands. Love isn't always loud, and neither is justice. If they don't see you now, they never deserve the view. I let the paper rest in my lap, and then I cried. Not from pain, not from anger, but from recognition. Because someone who mattered, had seen me all along. Grandma Eudora didn't speak often, but when she did, her words were meant to last a lifetime. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. The city was hushed, the sky bruised with the first hint of light. I didn't check messages. I didn't open the family group chat, though I knew it was buzzing with whispers and chaos. I brewed coffee, packed a weekender bag, and sat at the kitchen table with my laptop. A cabin by the Oregon coast. 3 nights, no cell service, a fireplace, a view of the Pacific. I booked it with 3 clicks. I didn't leave a note, no carefully drafted email, no righteous monologue. I owed them nothing. By mid-morning, I locked the apartment door behind me, pulled my suitcase down the hall, and called a cab to the train station. The train curved alongside the Willamette River, its steel frame rattling like a heartbeat. I watched as the city unfurled outside the window, the skyline softening into blur. For the first time in months, I felt the ache in my chest loosen. Not disappear, but ease, like a wound beginning to breathe. I arrived at the cabin just before dusk. It smelled of cedar and ocean salt. The owner had left a neat stack of firewood by the hearth and a handwritten note on the counter. Enjoy the stillness. I lit the fireplace, pulled a sweater around me, and sank into the worn armchair by the wide window. Outside, the Pacific stretched endlessly, dark blue meeting a burnt orange sky. The waves rolled in with their eternal rhythm, unconcerned with human drama. Back in Portland, the unraveling had already begun. Tobin scrambled to rebook vendors. The venue contract, released. The florist, fully booked for the next 6 weekends. The caterer, already gone, locked into another event in Bend. Isolde, ever obsessed with aesthetics, posted an Instagram story anyway. Plastic chairs lined up haphazardly in a backyard. A lopsided cake half decorated on a folding table. No caption, just a shaky boomerang. A cousin messaged me. "Is it true you canceled everything?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to, because I hadn't destroyed the wedding. I hadn't sabotaged anything. I had simply stopped holding it up. And sometimes, justice doesn't look like a courtroom. Sometimes, it looks like an empty tent, folding chairs from Walmart, and the absence of the one person who made everything stand. That night, I sat by the fire, listening to the logs crackle and the sea hiss beyond the window. I let the warmth sink into me. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel invisible. I felt free. The tide had rolled in and out twice since I arrived, but I hadn't kept track of time the way I used to, by emails, by alarms, by calls from people asking for favors. Now I measured the day by light, the soft pink that crept over the Pacific at dawn, the gray haze that settled just before dusk, and the gold that shimmered for a brief hour as the sun made its exit. That morning, I walked barefoot along the shoreline. The sand was cool beneath my feet, damp but not wet. It was the kind of quiet that didn't feel like a punishment anymore. For the first time in years, silence wasn't something I had to endure. It was something I chose. The wind was gentle, the waves steady. No screaming phones, no notifications blinking like accusations. Just breath, mine, my own, and that was enough. When I returned to the cabin, a message waited for me in my inbox. A cousin I hadn't heard from in months. No subject line, just an attachment. I opened it, half expecting something petty, something veiled in guilt. Instead, it was a single photo from what remained of the wedding. Plastic folding chairs on a patchy lawn, a delivery pizza box on the edge of a makeshift buffet, paper lanterns drooping, some already collapsed from rain. No flowers, no lighting, no music, and no me. I stared at the image, not smiling, not frowning. It didn't make me proud, but it made something in my chest ease. They had erased me from the credits, from the guest list, from the family stories, but what remained after my absence was not a party, it was a warning. I clicked out of the photo, shut my laptop, and walked to the kitchenette, made tea slowly. Let it steep long enough for the steam to fog the window above the sink. There were no more texts from Mom, no calls from Tobin, just stillness, and that was all right. Mid-morning, I opened my inbox again and saw a new message from Marla. The subject line read, "You made your point." Inside, a single paragraph. "You embarrassed us. You made a scene. You let us down." I read it once. That was enough. I didn't reply. I didn't forward it to Darcy. I didn't even get angry. I deleted it. Not out of defiance, out of clarity. I refused to audition for a role I never asked to play. I refused to re-enter a script I didn't write. And then, I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I opened a blank document on my laptop and titled it, "What I Won't Be Erased From." It wasn't a letter. It wasn't a journal. It was a reclaiming. I began typing without hesitation. I was there. I made the calls. I booked the venue. I paid the deposits. I stayed up late managing the spreadsheets no one wanted to open. I gave up weekends, holidays, quiet mornings, all because I thought maybe this time they'd see me. But they didn't. And still, I showed up. I was not petty. I was prepared. I didn't destroy the wedding. I simply stopped pretending I didn't matter. I wrote for 2 hours, not out of vengeance, not to be dramatic, but because no one else was going to write it down. And some things deserve to be remembered. That evening, I walked the shore again. The air had cooled, and the water kissed my ankles as I stood at the edge, waves tugging gently at my heels. I thought of Eudora, Grandma. Her words from that letter still lived inside me. Without you, the house crumbles. I repeated it silently, not as a declaration, but as a truth I no longer needed to prove. Healing doesn't shout. It doesn't need validation. It's a cup of tea that stays warm even when no one thanks you for brewing it. It's walking through a storm without needing to explain your umbrella. It's waking up and not rehearsing conversations that never go the way you want. It's not needing to be invited because you've built your own table, and finally, it seats one. Healing is knowing that silence isn't giving up. It's knowing when to stop arguing for your right to exist. And when I turned to walk back up the trail toward the cabin, I realized something I hadn't felt in a long time. Wholeness. Not because they apologized, not because they finally saw me, but because I did. They lost me quietly. And for the first time, I didn't feel like the one left behind. Sometimes the loudest thing you can do is walk away. Claire didn't ruin her brother's wedding. She stopped sacrificing herself for people who only saw her as useful, not worthy. This story isn't just about one event. It's about what happens when silence becomes a boundary, not a burden. Have you ever had to choose peace over family? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. And if this hit close to home, don't forget to subscribe. More powerful stories like this are on the way.